The gallery sparkled. 100 conversations buzzed in the air, a cloud of soft laughter and the quiet clink of expensive glassware. Men in crisp suits and women in dresses that seemed to flow like water stood in little groups, talking about art, about business, about holidays on beaches, with names Elara had only ever seen in magazines. She moved among them, a silent shadow in a simple black dress and comfortable black shoes. Her tray, heavy with slender glasses of golden champagne, was an extension of her arm. To the people here, she was just part of the room. A friendly face to take an empty glass, a hand offer a new drink. They would smile at her, a quick, absent-minded thing, before turning back to their important conversations. They never really saw her, and that was fine. It was her job to be invisible. Elara's eyes, though, kept drifting to the center of the room. There, on a low wooden platform, sat a grand piano. It was a beautiful monster of polished black wood, its lid propped open like a giant wing, showing the gleaming strings inside. It was the star of the show, but tonight it was silent, just a fancy piece of furniture. The real music in the room came from small speakers hidden in the corners, playing smooth, forgettable piano tunes. Every time she passed it, a little ache pinched her heart. Her fingers, curled around the tray, would twitch. She remembered a different feel, the cool, smooth touch of ivory keys, the weight of her hands ready to dance. It felt like a lifetime ago that she grew up with a piano. It wasn't fancy like this one. It was an old, scuffed upright that stood in the corner of their small living room, a gift from a neighbor who was moving away. Her mother, seeing how the 5-year-old Elara was drawn to it, saved for months to pay for lessons. And Elara took to it like a bird to the sky. It wasn't work. It was where she belonged. By 12, she was winning small competitions. By 15, she had a spot in a special program for gifted young musicians in the city. Her teacher would tell her mother, with tears in her eyes, "This one, she has it. She can really go somewhere." Her mother's face, tired from long shifts at the hospital cafeteria, would light up with a pride so bright it made Elara play even harder. They would dream together. Elara would play in great concert halls. She would record music. They would have a house with a bigger piano, a garden. The music was their escape, their shared language of hope, but life has a way of changing the tune. Her mother got sick. It was a slow, heavy sickness that meant she couldn't work. The medical bills were pieces of paper that kept coming, each one a heavier weight. The dream of the concert hall started to fade, replaced by the urgent, sharp reality of rent and prescriptions. Elara, just 18, made the only choice she felt she could. She left the music program. She took whatever job she could find. The piano in their living room gathered dust. Playing it felt like a cruel joke when her mother was resting in the next room, when the worry was a constant hum in her head. So she stopped. She packed the music away in a box in her mind and learned to carry trays, to balance plates, to smile politely and be invisible. Tonight, at this fancy gallery event, was just another job. It paid well. The people were nice enough. She was good at it. But as she weaved through the crowd, the silent grand piano was like a ghost from her past, beautiful and sad, watching her. She delivered a drink to a tall man discussing a painting. "The use of light is aggressive, don't you think?" he said. Elara glanced at the painting. It was all sharp red lines and angry black splashes. She thought of the gentle, flowing music of Chopin she used to play and how it could paint pictures of moonlight on water. The contrast was so strange, it almost made her laugh. She finished passing the drinks on her tray and slipped towards a quiet corner near the service door to take a quick breath. From here, she had a clear view of the piano. For a second, she let herself imagine it. Walking over, sitting down, letting her fingers find the keys. What would she play? Something soft and old. Maybe the first piece her mother ever loved to hear her practice. But she shook her head. It was a silly thought. She wasn't that girl anymore. She was the waitress. And the waitress had a job to do. She picked up a fresh tray of empty glasses to take back to the kitchen, the ghost of a melody playing silently in her head, a secret just for her. The party glittered on around her, completely unaware of the story walking through its midst. The party had found its rhythm. The smooth music from the speakers, the gentle buzz of talk, the soft light bouncing off the artwork, it all flowed together like a well-conducted song. Elara moved through it, a steady, quiet beat in the background. She watched the faces, refilled the glasses, and cleared away the little empty plates with perfectly practiced moves. Then, without any warning, the music died. It didn't fade out. It just stopped. 1 second there was a gentle piano melody floating in the air, and the next there was nothing. Just the loud, awkward sound of people talking. For a few seconds, nobody seemed to notice. Then, one by one, the conversation stumbled. People realized they were almost shouting. Laughter sounded too loud and sharp. The beautiful, easy feeling of the evening snapped like a tight string. An empty, uncomfortable silence rushed in to fill the space. The event manager, a man in a sharp gray suit who had been smiling all night, stopped smiling. His eyes went wide for a second. He hurried over to a small table in the corner where a laptop sat, its screen dark. He clicked some keys, tapped the side of it, but nothing happened. A little red light on a small black box by the wall just stared back at him, unblinking. The sound system had given up. Elara watched from near the kitchen door, a heavy tray of used glasses in her hands. She saw the manager's shoulders tighten. She saw him look out at the crowd. The guests were trying to keep their conversations going, but it was hard work. The silence was a physical thing, pushing in on them, making everything feel stiff and wrong. The elegant party was suddenly just a room full of people with nothing to do. The manager, trying to look calm, walked quickly to the gallery owner, a woman in a silver dress. They spoke in low, fast voices. Elara could see the woman's perfectly composed face start to look worried. The manager pulled out his phone, probably to call for help, but his fingers fumbled. It was clear. There was no quick fix. The music, that invisible thread holding the night together, was gone. A strange feeling started to stir in Elara's chest. It was a mix of things. There was pity for the nice manager, who was now sweating in his nice suit. There was the simple, practical thought that a silent party was bad for tips. But underneath all that was something else, something much older and deeper. It was the pull of the piano. Her eyes went to it. The grand piano sat there on its platform, quiet and powerful. It wasn't broken. It was ready. It didn't need wires or electricity. It just needed hands. Her own fingers, holding the metal tray, felt suddenly empty. They remembered. They remembered the weight of a key being pressed, the vibration of a string, the way a chord could fill a space much bigger than this room. A crazy, wild thought jumped into her head. It was so loud it almost made her gasp. I could do it. The thought terrified her. She hadn't played for a real person in years. Not since her mother got sick. Playing had become a private, sad thing. And then, not even that. What if she'd forgotten? What if her fingers were stiff from carrying trays? What if she sat down and nothing came out? People would stare. The manager would be angry. She'd probably lose her job. But then she looked at the crowd. They looked so uncomfortable, like fish out of water, gasping in the quiet. She looked at the piano. It was just sitting there, waiting. Her heart was beating so hard. She was sure people could see it, through her dress. The manager was walking back towards the service area, his face pale. He was passing right by her. It was now or never. If she didn't say something, he'd disappear into the back, and the moment would be gone. The party would just be this awkward, silent thing. As he came close, she took a small step forward, blocking his path just a little. He almost bumped into her and looked up, annoyed, ready to tell a waitress to move aside. Before he could speak, she did. Her voice came out softer than she wanted, almost a whisper. The piano. He blinked, confused. What? She took a tiny breath, forcing her voice to be steadier. She nodded towards the beautiful black instrument. The piano on the stage. It's tuned. I checked it earlier. This was a lie, but she knew it was true. A piano in a place like this was always kept ready. He stared at her, his brain moving slowly from his panic. He looked from her face to her uniform, then over to the piano, then back to her face. You play? She just nodded, not trusting herself to say more. A war happened on his face. She could see it. There was doubt. She was just staff. This was a huge risk. What if she was terrible? It could make everything worse. A joke at a fancy party. But then his eyes swept the room again. He saw a guest checking their watch. He saw two people giving up on talking and just looking at their phones. The silence was getting heavier by the second. He had no other option. Zero. The tech person wasn't answering their phone. He made a decision. His voice dropped low and urgent. Okay. Just play something quiet. Nice. Background music. You know? Just something to fill the air. For 15 minutes. Just until I can get this fixed or find someone else. He wasn't asking her to perform. He was asking her to be a human speaker. To be invisible, but noisy. It was the same job she had now, just with a different tool. For Elara, it was enough. It was a crack in the door. She nodded again, a quick, sharp movement. Okay, she said. She turned away from him, her hands cold. She walked to a nearby table and set her heavy tray down. It landed with a quiet clink. She didn't look at anyone. She smoothed her simple black dress with damp palms, took a deep breath that did nothing to calm her nerves, and started walking towards the platform where the piano waited. The walk felt like a mile long. She felt every eye in the room, though most people weren't even looking at her yet. She was just a waitress crossing the floor. But with each step, the noise of the party faded away, and the loud, rushing sound in her own ears grew. She reached the steps. She climbed them. The polished wood of the piano bench was cool under her hand. She sat down. The crowd was a blur in front of her. She adjusted the bench, a small, familiar habit. She opened the keyboard cover. The row of black and white keys lay before her, familiar and terrifying as the face of an old friend she'd wronged. She stretched her fingers, the joints cracking softly. She placed her hands gently on the keys. They felt like home. They felt like a storm. She had 15 minutes. She had to start. She closed her eyes for just a second, pushing the room, the job, the fear, all of it away. She thought of her mother's face, listening from the old sofa. She thought of the quiet dark of her childhood living room. She let her fingers find their place, and then she began to play. The first notes were soft. They were a gentle, thoughtful walk of keys, a quiet and familiar jazz song. It was something she'd played 1,000 times before, a comfortable old coat she could slip into. Her fingers, which had just been carrying the weight of a heavy tray, now touched the ivory with a lightness that surprised even her. They remembered. The memory wasn't in her head, but in her hands, in the curve of her fingers, in the pressure of her touch. The sound that came from the piano was warm and full. It didn't blast through the room. It simply arrived, like a friend walking in and filling the awful, empty silence. A few people near the front stopped talking mid-sentence. One man, holding a glass of red wine halfway to his lips, slowly lowered it back down to the table without looking. He turned his head toward the sound. His eyebrows went up, just a little. This wasn't the polite, forgettable music from the broken speakers. This was different. There was a person behind it. You could feel the thought in every note. Elara didn't look at them. She kept her eyes on her hands, on the dance they were beginning again after so many years apart. The first song was just her finding her way back, letting the muscles in her arms and shoulders remember how to move. The fear was still there, a tight knot in her stomach, but it was being slowly loosened by the music itself. With each passing measure, she felt a little more of herself return. The part of her that was just a waitress in a black dress began to fade into the background. She finished the jazz piece, letting the last note hang in the air for a respectful second. Then, without pausing, she let her hands drift into another. This one was a classical piece, something by Debussy. It was like painting with sound-soft washes of color, compressions of sunlight on water. Her touch became more confident. The music swelled a little and fell to a whisper. She wasn't just playing notes on a page anymore. She was telling a story without words. Now, more heads were turning. All over the gallery, conversations faltered and then stopped completely. A woman who had been explaining a complicated business deal to a partner just waved her hand softly, a signal to be quiet. They both listened. A group of young people by the modern sculpture, who had been laughing loudly a moment before, fell silent. One of them actually took a few steps closer to the piano, drawn in. The event manager stood frozen by the kitchen door, his phone forgotten in his hand. His mouth was slightly open. He had asked for background noise, for something to fill a gap. This was not that. This was a performance. The woman in the waitress uniform was no longer staff. She was the center of the entire evening. He felt a chill run down his spine, a mix of shock and a dawning incredible relief. Elara was somewhere else now. The gallery, the expensive art, the watching eyes, it was all melting away. She was in a practice room with a chipped wooden floor. She was at home, playing for her mother after school. The music was a time machine. She played a section that was technically difficult, a fast run of notes like a waterfall. Her fingers flew across the keys, not a single one out of place. A man in the crowd who knew a little about piano, his daughter, took lessons, let out a soft, involuntary gasp. He leaned over to his wife. That's really hard to play," he whispered, his voice full of awe. But it wasn't the difficulty that was holding the room captive. It was the feeling. You could hear the years in the music. You could hear the quiet sadness, the memory of something lost, but also a stubborn, beautiful kind of hope. It was too honest to just be background. It demanded to be heard. As the classical piece came to a close, Elara finally risked a glance up. Her heart jumped. Everyone was looking at her, not with curiosity anymore, but with a deep, focused attention. Their faces were soft. Some had small, wondering smiles. Others just looked stunned. There was no whispering. No one was checking their phone. The silence between her notes was no longer awkward. It was eager, waiting for the next sound. The 15 minutes the manager had asked for were almost up. She knew the tech person might be rushing in at any moment to fix the speakers. Her time on this stage, in this strange dream, was almost over. A new idea came to her, a reckless one. The 2 songs she'd played were from her old life, from the books of music she used to study. But there was another song, one that had never been written down. It was a melody that had lived in her head and heart for years, born in the long, quiet hours sitting by her mother's bedside. It was the sound of waiting, the sound of love that was tired and scared but refused to disappear. She had hummed it to herself on buses, tapped its rhythm on countertops during slow shifts. She had never, ever played it for another living soul. It was the most real thing she had. She took a deep, slow breath, her hands resting lightly in her lap for a moment. The room seemed to hold its breath with her. This was the point of no return. Playing the classics was safe. Playing the song from her own soul was like standing up here and taking off a mask. She placed her hands back on the keys. She played a single, low chord. It was a different sound, altogether darker, more personal. Then another. The melody began, simple and aching at first, like a question. It wound its way through the air, shy and beautiful. This wasn't a famous composer's work. This was hers. And as she played, she stopped thinking about technique, about the crowd, about anything at all. She just let the story out. The story of a daughter, of dreams packed away in a box, of love that was stronger than fear. A woman in the front row, an elegant older lady with sharp eyes, felt her own eyes suddenly fill with tears. She didn't know why. The music just touched a place deep inside her, a memory of her own. She didn't wipe the tears away. She just let them fall. The manager slowly lowered himself to lean against the wall, as if his legs wouldn't hold him up anymore. He understood now. He hadn't just found a replacement for a broken speaker. He had accidentally uncovered a secret, a piece of hidden treasure that had been right under his nose the whole evening. And Ilara played on, completely lost in the world she was creating, giving the most honest performance of her life to a room full of strangers while wearing her waitress uniform. The final note of her own song hung in the air, a single, clear sound that seemed to vibrate in the stillness before slowly, slowly fading into nothing. For a moment, there was absolute silence. It was a different kind of quiet than before. The first silence had been empty and awkward, a hole that needed to be filled. This silence was full. It was heavy with feeling, crowded with the story everyone had just heard. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. They were all suspended in the space the music had left behind. Ilara's hands slowly lowered into her lap. She felt hollowed out and light, as if she had just poured her entire self into the piano. The familiar gallery came rushing back into focus, the bright lights, the colorful paintings on the walls, the people standing frozen like statues, all staring at her. A hot wave of panic washed over her. What had she done? The manager had asked for quiet background music, and instead, she had played her private heart for the whole world to see. She braced herself for the sound of polite, confused clapping, or worse, no clapping at all. Then, it started. It wasn't a single person. It was like a wave breaking. One man near the back, a big man with a kind face, began to clap. Not a polite pat, but a solid, strong clap. The sound echoed in the quiet room. It was joined instantly by another, and then another. In 2 seconds, the entire room erupted. The sound was enormous. It wasn't just applause. It was a roaring, thunderous ovation. People were not just using their hands. They were stamping their feet on the polished floor, a deep, rhythmic drumming. They were whistling, shouts of bravo. And yes, cut through the noise. Faces were lit up with pure astonishment and delight. The elegant, reserved art crowd had vanished, replaced by an audience that had been completely won over. Ilara flinched, startled by the force of it. Her eyes widened. She looked out at the sea of cheering, smiling faces, and a confusion of emotions hit her. Relief so powerful it made her dizzy. Embarrassment, heating her cheeks. And underneath it all, a tiny, bright spark of a feeling she hadn't felt in years. Pride. She did the only thing that felt natural. She stood up from the piano bench, her legs a little shaky. She gave a small, quick bow, more of a nod of her head, her hands clasped tightly in front of her black dress. The applause grew even louder. Then the crowd began to move. They didn't wait for her to come to them. They surged toward the piano platform. The spell was broken, and now they were buzzing with energy and questions. The first to reach her was the event manager. His face was transformed. All the stress and panic were gone, replaced by a look of pure wonder. That was. "I have no words," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Who are you?" It wasn't a demand. It was a question full of genuine awe. Before she could even answer, a tall, slender woman with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes was at her side. She touched Alara's arm gently. "My dear," the woman said, and her voice carried a weight of authority. People around them quieted a little to listen. "That piece you finished with, the one that wasn't classical, that was original. That was yours, wasn't it?" Alara could only nod, her throat tight. The woman's eyes gleamed. She pulled a small, elegant case from her purse and extracted a crisp white card. She pressed it into Alara's hand. "I write about music. For the magazine downtown. I need to speak with you." That was not just playing. That was a story. Everyone in this room felt it. A man in a beautifully tailored suit pushed forward slightly. "I own a restaurant," he said quickly, his words tumbling out. "A nice place, over on the boulevard. We have a baby grand. We've been looking for someone to play on weekends. Not just tinkling, you understand? Real music. Like that." He gestured wildly at the piano. "Would you? Could you come in tomorrow? Just to talk?" Alara looked down at the business card in one hand, and then at the eager face of the restaurant owner, feeling like she was in a speeding car. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. More people pressed in. A young couple asked if she gave lessons. An older gentleman simply said, "Thank you. I haven't heard anything that beautiful in a very long time." Before melting back into the crowd, the gallery owner, the woman in the silver dress, now stood beaming beside the manager. "You have saved the evening," she said warmly. "More than saved it. You have made it unforgettable. The piano," she said, gesturing grandly to the instrument, "is yours whenever you wish to use it. Consider this your stage." Alara stood in the center of it all, still in her waitress uniform, the same one she'd been wearing when she carried trays of empty glasses. But she was not a waitress to these people anymore. They saw her, really saw her. They were looking past the black dress, straight at the person who had been hiding inside it. Got the noise and the attention were overwhelming. A whirlwind of smiling faces and offered hands and loud congratulations. But in the middle of the storm, Alara felt a strange calm. The heavy, silent thing she had been carrying for years, the ghost of the music, the shadow of the girl she used to be, was gone. She had set it free, and instead of leaving an emptiness, it had filled the room with light and sound and connection. She looked at the manager, who was watching her with a smile. No longer her boss, but her first believer. She looked at the business card in her hand. She listened to the happy chatter of the crowd, the party now alive with a new, excited energy, for the first time in a very, very long time. The future in front of her didn't look like a straight, predictable line. It looked like an open page of sheet music, waiting for her to write what came next. The whirlwind of the party finally began to settle. The last of the guests, still murmuring about the incredible waitress pianist, had drifted out into the night. The bright lights of the gallery were dimmed, leaving the space feeling quiet and large. Only the staff remained, moving slowly, stacking chairs and gathering the final empty glasses. Alara was back in the kitchen. The roar of the applause was still ringing in her ears, a sweet echo. But her hands were now doing a familiar, simple job, helping to clean. She wiped down a stainless steel counter, the smell of soap and old coffee grounding her. It felt strange, this return to normal. Yet, it wasn't the same. Something inside her had shifted, settled into a new place. The event manager walked in. He'd taken off his suit jacket and looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. He carried a white envelope in his hand. He came straight over to her. "I don't even know what to call you," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "Musician? Emergency savior?" He held out the envelope. "This is for tonight. For the waiting work, of course. But I've added a bit on top. A performer's fee, I suppose." Elara took the envelope. It was thicker than her usual pay. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. "And thank you for taking the chance on me. It was the best decision I ever made by accident." He laughed. Then his expression softened. "What you said about the piano being tuned. You just said that to get me to say yes, didn't you?" She felt her cheeks grow warm and gave a small, guilty shrug. "I just knew it had to be. A piano like that. It's meant to be played." He nodded, understanding. "Well, you were right. And listen, about the gallery owner's offer." She meant it. "We host private viewings, small dinners. We'd like you to be our musician, properly, no tray in hand." He pulled out his own phone. "Give me your number. Let's talk properly next week. We'll set a real rate, a real schedule." She recited her number, watching as he typed it in. A direct line now existing between her old life and this new, shimmering possibility. "I'll call," he promised. "Get home safe and play something for yourself tonight, okay?" After he left, Elara finished her work in a kind of happy daze. She changed out of her black uniform in the small staff bathroom, folding it neatly and placing it in her bag. She put on her own simple coat. It felt different now. It felt like her coat. She stepped out the back door into the cool night air. The city sounds greeted her, the distant hum of traffic, a siren far away. She started the walk to the bus stop, her mind replaying the night like a movie. But a new thought, clear and strong, pushed its way to the front. She didn't want to go straight home. Not yet. She changed direction, her feet carrying her on a familiar route, away from the main boulevards and into a quieter, older part of the neighborhood. She stopped in front of a small, modest apartment building. She looked up at a window on the third floor. A soft, warm light was on behind the curtains. Her mother's light. She took out her phone. Her fingers, which had flown across the piano keys hours before, now dialed a well-known number. It rang twice before a voice, tired but warm, answered. "Hello, my love. Are you finished with your shift? You must be exhausted." "Hi, Ma," Elara said, the words catching in her throat a little. "I'm finished. But I'm not tired. I'm outside. Downstairs. Can I come up?" "Outside?" "Of course. Come up. Is everything all right?" Her mother's voice was suddenly laced with concern. "Everything's good," Elara said, and for the first time in years, she felt the truth of those words in her bones. "Better than good. I need to tell you a story." A few minutes later, she was sitting on the edge of her mother's bed, in the same room with the old, silent, upright piano in the corner. She held her mother's thin hands in her own. She told her everything. About the broken music, the silent crowd, the wild, scary decision. She told her about the feel of the keys, about playing the old jazz tune, then the classical piece. Then, her voice dropping to a whisper, she told her about playing their song, the one born from the quiet hours in this very room. Her mother listened, her eyes never leaving her daughter's face. As Elara spoke, she saw her mother's eyes fill with tears. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were the same tears from long ago, from when she used to listen to her little girl, practiced tears of fierce, overwhelming pride. "You played it?" her mother whispered, her voice cracking. "You played our song? For people?" "I did," Alara said, tears now streaming down her own face, but she was smiling. "And they heard it, Ma. They really heard it." Her mother pulled her into a tight hug, her body frail, but her arms strong. "I always knew they would," she murmured into her daughter's hair. "I always knew it wasn't gone. It was just waiting." They sat like that for a long time. Then her mother pulled back, wiping her eyes. "So what happens now?" she asked, her gaze sharp and hopeful. Alara reached into her bag. She pulled out the white envelope and placed it in her mother's lap. Then she carefully laid the business card from the music writer next to it. "This is what happens now," she said softly. "A real job playing music. A writer who wants to talk to me. The gallery wants me back." Her mother picked up the card, her hands trembling slightly. She read it, then looked at the envelope, then back at her daughter's shining face. A beautiful, radiant smile broke across her features, erasing years of worry. "My pianist," she said, the words full of love. Later, as her mother slept, Alara sat on the bench of their old upright piano. She didn't play. She just rested her hands on the familiar, slightly yellowed keys. She looked at the wall, where a faded drawing she'd made as a child, a picture of herself, playing in a big hall, was still pinned. The dream hadn't died. It had just taken a detour. It had been waiting for her in a silent gallery, dressed in a black uniform, ready to be found when the world went quiet enough to hear it. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would look like. There would be a call to make, a meeting to go to. There would still be hard days, and bills, and her mother's health to care for. But the music was no longer a ghost in the corner. It was a living thing again, a part of her work, a part of her future. It was a door that had been slammed shut for years, and tonight she had finally found the key. She stood up, turned off the light, and kissed her sleeping mother on the forehead. As she walked to the door, she gave one last look at the piano. It didn't look sad anymore. It just looked like what it always was, hers. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt completely, peacefully like herself.